The strategic oil reserve is a major issue for the country, and we need to make sure that we have as much of it as possible for, God forbid, any reason that we were unable to get our access to oil. Angus Taylor is the Energy Minister, and we spoke a bit earlier.
We are, of course, a very significant consumer of liquid fuels. We use it for farming, for mining, for commuting, for tradies, you name it, and we need to have a very reliable fuel supply. Now, the good news is right now, it is reliable. The world's awash with fuel, but we can't always rely on that. There have been disruptions in the past. Many of us will remember many of your viewers will remember the 1970s and the 1980s when we had disruptions. We had odds and even cars and all those sorts of things that meant we didn't have the reliable supply we needed. So putting this supply, this strategic reserve in place will ensure that we have that supply when we really need it for a rainy day. It's an important commitment by the government, but it is also being done in a way which is value for taxpayers, Paul, because we can get fuel right now at historically low prices. We haven't seen prices like this in real terms ever in history, and that creates an enormous opportunity for us to build this reserve and have the back of those important users of fuel.
Previously, people like Bob Catter, Jim Molan, yourself, plenty of others have been concerned that we got down to 30 days of oil supply is all we had in the strategic reserves. With $100 million, does it go to 35 days, 45 days? Can you put a number on it for me?
Well, it depends on the price. It depends on the price. I mean, obviously $94 million goes a long way, when you're buying it for next to nothing. Paul, we saw negative prices a couple of days ago, and of course that means you can get infinite amounts with $94 million. But look, the point is we use about 1 million barrels a day in Australia, so you know if we're paying $15, you do the maths. It's not too hard to work out. You can buy 5 or 6 days. If very low prices, a little less than that, slightly higher prices, it'll depend on the price we pay. But this is an important step in establishing a reserve. We've relied in the past on companies to hold those reserves. This is the government stepping in and saying, no, we need more. We've got to make sure that we have that reliable fuel supply that Australians need. Over time, it'll mean establishing more storage here in Australia, and we're very conscious of that. But the important point is ensuring that those consumers, as both commuters and retail consumers, as well as wholesale buyers like miners and farmers, have the fuel they need.
Where do we physically put it? I know that it's going to go into the US first, but at some point we need to be able to store this stuff here. How do we do it? Yeah, how do we dig the holes in the ground? Where do we put it?
Well, the problem right now is there's almost no storage in the world, and the reason for that is demand has collapsed because of COVID-19. Jet fuel demand is almost zero. Petrol demand has fallen sharply, diesel a little less so, and that's meant that the tanks all around the world are full or close to full, with one exception, which is the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Because of our relationship with the US and this US administration, it's a very, very strong one. They're allowing us to use that reserve at a time when we can buy very cheap fuel. Now, we critically want to make sure that over time we bring that on shore. That means putting it on existing refinery sites. Some of the old refinery sites are really good potential opportunities. We're working with the industry and the refiners right now. We began discussions with them some time back on the best possible locations, but it will be about getting it close to the customer, because this is ultimately about making sure they have the fuel they need.